Dr. Johan Lindeque, co-author of the textbook Doing Business in Europe, will join us.
You've asked me two questions, or to speak about two topics today. Firstly, Brexit, and secondly, what advice I might have for an American firm thinking about doing business in Europe, or possibly thinking about how to do business better in Europe in future. And I will simply take them in turn and share a few of my thoughts on these topics with you.
In this course, you will work in teams as a business consultant, providing recommendations to a real company based in Europe.
Dr. Johan Lindeque, co-author of the textbook Doing Business in Europe, will join us, together with other renowned guest speakers, to share how U.S. companies can expand their businesses into this promising market.
My name is Johan Lindeque, and I am co-author with Professor Gabriel Suda of the textbook Doing Business in Europe. I'm delighted that you will use our text during the course with Dr. Doria. I'm sure you will learn a lot and have a lot of fun as well. I wish you a fantastic learning experience from Alton in Switzerland, and I'm very much looking forward to briefly joining you virtually in class to answer your questions during the course.
A balanced blend between the classroom and online classes.
Are you ready to show how much you learned and compete against your peers in a unique board game?
Doing Business in Europe,
with several guest speakers directly from Europe through video conferencing, and Dr. Evaristo Doria.
Starting with Brexit, possibly let's say the most contemporary and fascinating thing going on in Europe at the moment, at least from a British perspective. I'm not so sure many of the European leaders want to have much more to do with Brexit, but they have no choice. And for me, it's actually also quite a personal topic, having lived the first 15 years of my time in Europe, in the United Kingdom, having studied at the University of Bath, and then my first position in Belfast, which, as you know, is at the center of a region of the UK that is critical to the challenges that Brexit is facing. And it's honestly quite difficult to separate the personal from the factual in thinking about Brexit as a result, which I think is also true for many other people involved more directly and at more senior levels in trying to resolve the Brexit challenges. I've been asked to think about this in terms of where did this start, where are we now, and where is Brexit going in the future? And especially with where did this start, it's very interesting to think about my experiences during the time that I lived in the UK, as well as some of the more formal aspects. So I think the UK as a country, politically, but also the citizens have always had a conflicted relationship with the European Union, or with Europe more generally. Let's put it that way. Simultaneously finding many things about life on the continent, as they would call it, very attractive and interesting, and at the same time also having a strong sense of independence as an island nation. And I think many of these things are coming together in Brexit. So the origins, I think, in a way, you can choose how far back you want to go. Possibly the most objective is to simply go back to the previous government, to David Cameron, and his attempts to resolve some of the political dilemmas that he perceived as a conservative politician in the UK, and sought to resolve and was unable to, and having committed to a referendum, felt compelled to live up to that commitment during the election process. And then that, of course, resulted in the outcome which surprised many, and at the same time didn't surprise people. Surprised that it actually happened, and then in trying to make sense of it, being able to find many indicators that would have suggested that this was always a possibility. Exactly whether the outcome of the Brexit referendum could have been avoided, I think, is something that will be debated for many years, and possibly without any answer being possible. So the origins are complex, both political politically motivated, but also based on the country as a whole and kind of public sentiment. But of course, also factually, the British have always understood the European Union or the single market as an economic project. And this is true in their policymaking and also in the way that they've engaged with the European institutions. And increasingly, as the European Union moved closer to political union, there's been growing unease with exactly where this is going and the degree to which this is something that the British find desirable and kind of meets what they thought they were signing up to when they eventually did successfully join. Because of course the British did not have an easy path into membership. They were blocked at least once in their attempts to join. And so you will see commentators now referring back to these moments in history and seeing them as justified choices at the time and to some degree as coming full circle. So where are we now? If you've been watching the debates in Parliament, if you've been watching news clips online of European meetings of heads of state and even vaguely following the Brexit process, you will see that we're in a very strange and unexpectedly difficult place after 2 years of planning to exit. At the same time, many would say it's probably par for the course for European processes. That 11th hour decision-making is taking place. At the same time, there are some very interesting features of where we are now. What you increasingly see in the British press is observations of around this idea of the democratic deficit of the European Union and how some of this is being confounded by the goodwill that has been shown on the part of the European Union decision makers on the other side of the Brexit process, where the UK is repeatedly needing to go back and renegotiate deadlines and seek to find solutions and finding very positive responses from the other member states through their heads of state, especially, and accommodation to a degree which I think many thought would not happen. Of course, there's always a little bit of politicking going on, and at the same time, you have within the British context in Parliament, significant factionalism. Really a very divided house, seeking to find a way forward, and no one yet been able to find a way to bring a majority view to where the UK wants to go. And this idea of what the final solution should look like from a British perspective and a European perspective to be attractive and acceptable to both sides is kind of how I understand where we are now. And of course, there is no final destination till the British decide what they want, and this process is taking much longer than expected. You can think of many reasons for why this might be. Maybe the current government wasn't open enough in the exchanges with the House of Commons in seeking to frame the withdrawal agreement in the first place, or trying to understand what the majority preference was for what Brexit would look like. Not everyone is in favor of a hard Brexit, clearly. And so this is where we are now. What's the future going to look like? Here, I have to say, I defer to someone who has far superior experience and knowledge than I do, from actually having been active within the European institutions for many years, Sir Ivan Rogers. And if you have some spare time, I can highly recommend looking up some of his speeches or some of the interviews with him on YouTube, for example, where he speaks about his time between 2013 and 2017 as the UK representative to the European Union, but also his experiences of doing trade deals. And he makes a very interesting point that Brexit is unique if you think about this academically, it's the first time we have a major, large, developed economy voluntarily choosing. In fact, I think voluntarily versus involuntarily is irrelevant because no large developed economy has ever left a preferential trade agreement in the way that the UK is doing this. And he makes the point that this makes Brexit very different to the opposite, which is accession to the European Union. When a candidate member country takes the first steps towards membership, they have a clear menu of tasks that they need to complete. It's very clear what all the chapters are that they need to work through to align their economy and their institutions with the European Union to be a functioning member state once they accede to the Union. This is not the case with Brexit. With Brexit, we don't know what the final destination is going to be. And the political leaders in the UK don't seem to be able to decide. This creates a lot of uncertainty and makes decision-making far more difficult because you, as he points out, you can't simply systematically work your way through all the choices that you have to make and align to the standard, because the standard that you're seeking to achieve or the framework that you're seeking to achieve is not determined yet. And even once you know what that is going to be, it's very hard when you get down into the details to negotiate what the right level of alignment or non-alignment will be line by line. So he says that this is going to continue for very long, for a decade, maybe longer, because the negotiations that are going to be needed to reverse, partially reverse, fully reverse across a diverse range of industries and agreements, is far more complex than acceding to the European Union. So I summarize him. I point you to him online if you would like more detail. He really is an extremely considered and informed commentator, both because of practice and experience that he has, but also simply his intellectual work in trying to understand what's going on. And I take his view as well, that this is going to be something which is going to be studied as well as an academic for many years because of these unique features. So having dealt with Brexit in a very short manner, let me turn to thinking about this question of what advice do I have for an American firm thinking about the European market. I hesitate to frame this in terms of Brexit as well, but to some degree it's inevitable that how you would have thought about this before Brexit and how you would think about this after Brexit is fundamentally different. We know that the United Kingdom economy and the US economy are highly integrated and linked. We know that some of the earliest foreign direct investment that was made by American firms abroad was in the UK, in the automotive sector. We know that these are also the investments that many of the early scholars in international business studied because it was so interesting at the time. But we also know that the UK has been a launch pad, if you like, into the European single market for many decades for especially Anglophone countries. And this, depending on the final outcome of Brexit and the degree of alignment of the UK economy with the EU, the answer is potentially different for an American firm thinking about the European. Because of the fact that the UK may have more shared cultural heritage, may have a shared language, maybe is more understandable in terms of its institutions for an American businessman. And the degree to which that is attractive depends on the degree to which the EU is the market versus the UK economy being the host of the market that the firm is targeting, and linked to that the degree to which the UK economy is still integrated with the European single market, with low barriers to trade and investment between the UK and the rest of the EU. At the same time, I think there are some general things we can say about doing business in Europe, which are kind of takeaways that you could use at any time when you're thinking about the EU market. So I think one of the interesting things about the European Union and the single market is that it is simultaneously a whole, a single thing, and at the same time it is featured by diversity and still ongoing divergence, right? So there's this regional, at the macro region, an economy which is integrated, increasingly integrated, and still differences remain. You can experience this at the individual level simply by trying to be a cross-border worker. Many things are still organized at the state level. Regardless of harmonization at the EU level, the implementation is through the member state. And you have to figure out what the main member state is that matters to you, and you have to go through their processes, which are EU conform. But this kind of divergence and internal difference is simultaneously also attractive, right? Because firms can effectively be doing business within a single economic space, but still have the opportunity to take advantage of the disaggregation of the value chain, or to think about how the differences across countries can be leveraged to create value within a single set of norms and institutional rules and regulations, which are broadly shared, which is kind of attractive and which is also what makes the EU unique. A link to this then is that the greater the degree to which the American firm will be present in the EU, across the EU member countries, and I mean there are now 28, there will be 27, there may then be many more when the Western Balkan countries join over the next decade. There is a strong need for an American firm to understand the need to manage diversity. For example, in the workforce that a European firm may have. So it's true that across large countries, and the US is a large country, right? There are differences between places within a country. But of course, Europe is a little bit more complex in that these differences are also embedded within different national environments and cultures, which can be quite diverse. And that means that employees can think very differently about how they work. And that needs to be accommodated. And we can think about Eastern European members, we can think about Central European members, we can think about different ways of organizing countries so that we can try and capture these commonalities in the way that people think about working life or doing work. And this needs to be managed. And the greater the degree to which an American firm will be present in more than one member state, the more important understanding the need to appreciate, be able to manage, and see the value creation potential in the diversity of the workforce would be important. As a source of value creation. Yeah, I mean, and even though we have a harmonized set of formal rules for the EU, across the member states, we also have what you can call different varieties of capitalism, right? Different, still existing alternative understandings of how to organize market economies. We can think about France versus Germany versus the UK, versus other models that Eastern European countries may have a slightly different situation because they're transition economies. And so within the institutional structures that exist within these alternative approaches, there are opportunities for firms, right? Some of these institutional structures, if we think about innovation, are more so suited to incremental innovation and the pursuit of incremental innovation over time. Others are more suited to pursuing radical innovation. And to some degree, a non-European firm choosing to locate in the European Union, in the single market, gets to choose, within what kind of institutional system would they like to embed themselves within the overarching region that is seeking to harmonize. And at the same time, allow this variety in institutional structures to persist at the individual member state level. It's quite complex and interesting at the same time, with significant potential for firms. Yeah. So, do I have a final thought on that? I guess as I was writing all of that down, because I'm an IB scholar by background, I couldn't help myself by thinking, I mean, to some degree, we're back to Dunning's 4 FDI motives, right? What is the firm that's coming to Europe seeking to achieve? Are they seeking markets? Are they seeking to simply sell? Are they seeking strategic assets? Do they want to buy a firm that has unique knowledge resources in a particular country? Is that the right environment for them at the national level or not? Does it matter, given the strategic resources that firm might have? Do they simply need to accommodate the member state differences given the assets that they're after? I mean, natural resources, Europe has those. To what degree that is an attractive reason for an American firm to come to Europe, there I have my doubts. I suspect it's less likely. I suspect we're more in a market-seeking or a strategic asset-seeking scenario, or potentially efficiency-seeking, combined with one of the other two. So I think some of the basic principles will always hold, and at the same time, this idea of a very complex mosaic of consistency and difference within the European single market is the thing that I would encourage any American business person to think about, right? You're going to have many similarities. There are going to be many benefits from a harmonized institutional environment, but differences are always going to persist. And you should see these as opportunities and not as a negative feature of the euro.